Hello, good morning, church. The first reading is from the book of Genesis, chapter 45, 3 to 11, and also 15. Joseph said to his brothers, I am Joseph. Is my father still living? But his brothers were not able to answer him because they were terrified at his presence. Then Joseph said to his brothers, Come close to me. When they had done so, he said, I am your brother Joseph, the one you sold into Egypt. And now do not be distressed and do not be angry with yourself for selling me here, because it was to save lives that God sent me ahead of you. For 2 years now there has been famine in the land, and for the next 5 years there will be no plowing and reaping. But God sent me ahead of you to preserve for you a remnant on earth and to save your lives by great deliverance. So then, it was not you who sent me here, but God. He made me father to Pharaoh, lord to his entire household, and ruler of all Egypt. Now hurry back to my father and say to him, This is what your son Joseph says. God has made me lord of all Egypt. Come down to me, don't delay. You shall live in the region of Goshen and be near me, you, your children and grandchildren, your flocks and herds, and all you have. I will provide for you there, because 5 years of famine is still to come. Otherwise, you and your household and all who belong to you will become destitute. And he kissed all his brothers and wept over them. Afterward, his brothers talked with him. That ends the first reading. So the second reading is from Luke 6:27 to 38. But to you who are listening, I say, love your enemies, do good to those who hate you, bless those who curse you, pray for those who ill-treat you. If someone slaps you on one cheek, turn to them the other also. If someone takes your coat, do not withhold your shirt from them. Give to everyone who asks you, and if anyone takes what belongs to you, do not demand it back. Do to others as you would have them do to you. If you love those who love you, what credit is that to you? Even sinners love those who love them. And if you do good to those who are good to you, what credit is that to you? If even sinners do that, and if you lend to those from whom you expect repayment, what credit is that to you? Even sinners lend to sinners, expecting to be repaid in full. But love your enemies, do good to them, and lend to them without expecting to get anything back. Then your reward will be great, and you will be children of the Most High, because He is kind to the ungrateful and wicked. Be merciful, just as your Father is merciful. Do not judge, and you will not be judged. Do not condemn, and you will not be condemned. Forgive, and you'll be forgiven. Give, and it will be given to you, a good measure, pressed down, shaken together, and running over, will be poured into your lap. For with the measure you use, it will be measured to you. And the third reading is from 1 Corinthians 15:35 to 38 and 42 to 50. But someone will ask, how are the dead raised? With what kind of body will they come? How foolish, when you sow, does not come to life unless it dies. When you sow, you do not plant the body that will be, but just a seed, perhaps of wheat or something else. But God gives it a body as it has determined, and to each kind of seed He gives its own body. So will it be with the resurrection of the dead. The body that is sown is perishable, it is raised imperishable. It is sown in dishonor, it is raised in glory. It is sown in wickedness, it is raised in power. It is sown a natural body, it is raised a spiritual body. If there is a natural body, there is also a spiritual body. So it is written, the first man Adam became a living being, and the last Adam a life-giving spirit. The spiritual did not come first, but the natural, and afterward the spiritual. The first man was of the dust of the earth, the second man is of heaven. As was the earthly man, so are those who are of the earth. And as is the heavenly man, so also are those who are of heaven. And just as we have borne the image of the earthly man, and so shall we bear the image of the heavenly man. I declare to you, brothers and sisters, that flesh and blood cannot inherit the kingdom of God, nor does the perishable inherit the imperishable. God bless the reason of his word. Thank you.
Good morning, church. How are you? So, thank you, Michael, for reading the text. So, the title today of this epiphany of this sermon is the Epiphany of Jesus Christ. You may wonder why I'm talking about Epiphany, right? Okay, so the season we are actually now is the end of the Epiphany season, according to traditions of other churches. And I wanted to include this because I know that we are not all from the same background. We are not all Presbyterian. So, for example, in the Lutheran and Anglican Church, we are at the seventh Sunday of the Epiphany. What is the Epiphany? We know it, French, for example, for galette des rois. See, my husband is already saying this. Galette des rois is this cake that we share during Epiphany Day to commemorate the revelation of Jesus Christ to the Magi. And so I will not go into details, but then the Epiphany of Jesus Christ is not only on that day. Symbolically for these churches, there are 4 events that reveal the Son of God to humanity. So in their calendar, for example, so the first day is January, beginning of January. And on this day, we commemorate the revelation of Jesus Christ to not only Jews, but also the Gentiles, because if we remember, the announcement of Jesus' birth was done to the, not the pastors, how do you call them? Les bergers, yeah, and who were Jewish, but also to foreigners from way far who came to adore Jesus too. Then the second event in this season for this church is the baptism, and they are usually reading the baptism of Jesus Christ. And this is a significant moment because during this service, we are reminded of the presence of the 3 personas of God, our God 3 in 1. Because it is during the baptism of Jesus Christ that the people get to see Jesus recognized as the Son of God through his baptism. Then we hear also the voice of the Father, the Creator, who asserts him as his Son. And eventually, the third person, which is the Holy Spirit, descends on him in the form of a dove. Then the third event that reveals Jesus as the Messiah, that shows God's glory. Do you know what it is? His first miracle? Someone said it? Yeah, Cana. My husband really likes this because it says like, oh, I'm allowed to drink wine because Jesus turned water to wine. So yes. Yes, the miracle of Cana. For example, this year, the text reading was on January 19th. And actually, this is the starting point for Jesus' disciple, where they see this miracle and they started believing in him. And last but not least, will happen next Sunday, according to the Common Revised Lectionary, and it's the Transfiguration Sunday, where, again, God affirms Jesus Christ as his Son, and also states his authority when he tells to the inner circle who came with him on the mountain, listen to him. So we have this Epiphany season showing that the gates of heaven are open now for humanity. What are we going to do with it? Are we saying like, yes, Jesus has come and good, and I will live my life as I do as usual? Or are we going to respond to this? Now, if I ask you, what is the big revolution that Jesus' arrival brought to the world? Like a new commandment that we have heard through the reading today, and which is rightly illustrated by the image that Julien chose. Let me decode this picture for you. Can you see? So, what can you see in this picture? Two different worlds, apparently apart, right? On the other side, we have this blue, and the other side, this side. So they seem to be separated. And with the arrival of Jesus Christ, something happens. First, I would like you to remember maybe your Sunday school learning. What is the first commandment, or the most important commandment for God and Jesus? We find it in Matthew and Luke. It is like, you shall love your God with all your heart, and your neighbor as yourself. Okay. And now we have another one in the text we read from Luke, right? Which is, love your enemy. So how does loving your neighbor turn into love your enemy? So before we answer this question, let us see what Luke says of this in the text we have read. So in the Gospel of Luke, we can see that Jesus is talking about some sort of enemies. And for example, we have a slave master and a creditor. So, and the slave master is supposed to be the one who slaps the person on the cheek, and the creditor is the one who's asking the peasant to take away not only his outer garment, but also his shirt. So, what do you think of this situation? Is it normal for Jesus to ask people who are humiliated to love their humiliators? How would you respond? Say like, what are you saying? I mean, I have my own worth. How should I accept to be humiliated like this? But Jesus is giving a creative solution in the face of humiliation. In both instances, he advises the peasant. By the way, context, this is in the time of peasants being in debt and peasants being owned by slaves. He asks them to take an initiative, not to face humiliation passively, but do something. And do something that may trigger some reaction to the oppressor in front of them. So by turning the other cheek, the slave is choosing not to be passive, but is daring his oppressor or his master to treat him as an equal. Because he's saying, okay, you're slapping me here, but now try the other one and see if the humiliation you're giving me can be stopped, because you have feelings of maybe seeing that I'm already down. Will you go again down against me? Or maybe you will reflect that, okay, what I'm doing here is already humiliating enough. And then in the example of the peasant who is in debt, usually when the peasant would go in court with the person, his creditor, he would have no money to pay. And the judge would usually say, okay, because he has no money, take his outer garment. But then Jesus says, remove not only your tunic, not only your outer garment to protect you from the cold, but also your tunic. What would be the result? You would be completely naked. And in the face of this, how would the creditor react? Like standing in front of the house of his debtor, proudly, or maybe feeling like, okay, maybe I've embarrassed him enough. I should do something about this. So by saying this, Jesus is asking us, when we are humiliated, to think maybe we are humiliated, but we should not do nothing about it. He's asking us to find creative ways to respond to the humiliation. And some people in history have done this through what we call nonviolent resistance. We all know about Gandhi and Martin Luther. And what we know about this is that we have Holy Spirit. Maybe we maybe not know what we can do, but the easier way would be to just do nothing, and then what happens? Anger builds up inside. And then we end up whether feeling sorry for ourselves, hating ourselves because we didn't respond, and eventually anger disruptively goes out. And for example, we know that I've read about some mass, shootings because of people who build up their anger. And because they couldn't respond to them, eventually the revenge went on other people, and we heard about this revenge mass killing. So what non-violence resistance would be is to challenge the enemy. And the challenge is hard enough because instead of ignoring them, we actually confront them. And when Jesus used love your enemy, it doesn't mean ignore their threat, ignore the assault. It doesn't mean accept the humiliation. It doesn't mean be nice, just be nice. And it doesn't mean don't say anything. Because sometimes we say like, okay, we've been wronged, but okay, I'll let go. But then if you let go, it builds up. And then you give the opportunity to the so-called enemy to do it again, and do it again, and do it again. So let's see now what... no, sorry. I was saying that... let me find this. Okay. Context of Luke, yes. So now we go back to something more common, because our enemy may be a big word, but we don't often have enemies in our lives. We may have people that disagree with us, that we dislike, but we wouldn't call them enemy, right? And now I would like to come to what we call loving the enemy within, which is someone that we are close to, or first, before we are close to, someone who is in our community. For example, in church or in our work setting, these people that we have hard time accepting. So, according to Jesus, what would be loving them? One of my questions is, how does the neighbor that we are asked to love becomes our so-called enemy? Do you have any idea? Because having a neighbor is okay, as long as you don't get too close, right? Saying hello, hello, we keep our distance is good. But when do we begin to have this relationship that is challenging? We have lots of examples. Dating, parents, spouse, co-workers. When does it become challenging? I made up like a reminder, like D, 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 and D. Let me find it. So first, we disagree. Okay? Everybody is allowed to disagree, but some people think that, for example, because we are in church, we're not allowed to disagree. Otherwise, it would be conflict. Okay? Then, because we disagree so many times, we start to dislike the other one. And when it happens in family, we disagree, and sometimes the kids disagree so much that they act out, and what do? They disobey. And it would be fine, but at some point, it escalates, and we are found with what we call power struggles. So every relationship should be normal and nice, but the natural process, because we are human, it's power struggle. Now we come with the, let me find it, dominate. Dominate, like, or to have our way. Now look at your relationships, your friends or things, like, what is the trigger of sometimes some of your tensions? Someone, even you sometimes, want to be right. You always want to be right. Or you want that person to do what you want, and you can't accept them thinking or doing different things than you think. And what we usually use is the you should, you should, you should. Try to see, when you talk, most of the time you are telling people, you should, like, my way is better, now you should. Then how do you react? I have my own ways too. I don't have to follow yours. So the creative way, as Jesus has instructed us, what would it be? Like, say, okay, you say you should, I will. Now you do this, what happens at the same time, in the long run? And it happens between spouses. There's always a dominant and a submissive one. Say, like, okay, but at some point, one of the spouses will say, okay, enough. I followed your way so many years, I'm so tired now, enough. Okay? And this happens naturally because we get familiar with each other, we don't put boundaries anymore. So the idea is to stop demonizing the one who we disagree with. We don't know them, or we think we know them, maybe because we're married for 20 years, 30 years. They are our kids. We brought them up, we know them, and we are there telling them, this is the way and not it's the only way. Now, if you would face this, how would you react to? So another advice is to start to put yourself in the shoes of the one you disagree with, because this may be turning, as Jesus says, the other cheek. If you confront them and say, like, okay, we've been there, and maybe we need to find other ways to cope with the situation. And what I read also is something called by psychologists as the projection theory. According to psychologists, we don't know people 100%, and sometimes we project, we have projections of them. We project according to our needs, emotional needs, or what we perceive. And most of the time, do you know what we project? Our darker impulses. So let's try to imagine you don't like this thing in someone. Turns out maybe it would be the thing that you can't stand about yourself. And I came across a funny example, funny in a way. It's in the Lutheran church. There was this female pastor who fought for years about accepting gay and lesbians in church, until she had her own epiphany. It is related to what I just said. She didn't know, and she ignored that she was a lesbian herself. So that's why she combated, like she struggled to accept gays and lesbians at church, because she couldn't come to terms with what she was. So she was vilifying the part of herself and projecting it onto others. Yes, I think that's it. So to finish with what loving your enemy is not, the revolution that Jesus brought is that loving our neighbor is, our enemy is not an ideal. It is real and it happens. And we can see it in the first text we read. This is a typical story of Sunday school about reconciliation. So, I'm sure you know the story, right? What brings this? What happened before? So Joseph, the son of Jacob, was sold by his elder brothers because they were jealous of him. He was the favorite. So and he was left dying. They thought he was left dying in a pit. And years later, they came across each other. And surprise, the one that they hated became someone very influential. And as we read, he was put into a great position by Pharaoh. And here we have an example of what God does to someone who trusts and relies on him. So we can see that Jacob does the opposite of what we called earlier the demonization. Like, instead of calling out the brother for what they did to him, he actually sees God's intervention or God's hand on what happened to him. If you read, you say, like, God sent me ahead of you, and God actually placed me where I am because of what you did to me. So maybe sometimes we need to ask God, why are these people that we feel as enemies do this to us? are they actually a mirror of what needs to be transformed in us? And last but not least, this grace is not only in talking. He didn't even say, I forgave you, but what he did or what he promised showed that he forgave them. And I quote, he said, I will provide for you. I will protect you. So, see, loving the enemy, relying on God is not impossible. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's not easy to love our enemies. Even I'm a pastor, I know it's not easy. Yeah, I have to admit it's not easy because you don't know what I have several enemies in my neighborhood. Someone who throw their trash in front of my house. Yeah, one day, to be honest, I didn't have a good relationship with my neighborhood because some of my neighbors make some noise in the night time. But everybody knew I'm a pastor. I couldn't tell them, okay, please keep quiet, because I don't know how to say be quiet in politely in Mauritius. But one day, very suddenly changed a lot. One day, one of my neighbors came to my house, say very slowly, what's your name? And they say, my name is Ingyu. He said, I know Ingu. I know it's Ingyu. And then it's my turn. What's your name? He said, my name is Baby. I said, sorry, I don't got it. What's your name? Please. But I'm quite sure some French name is Baby, but he said, it's Baby, B-A-B-Y. And then, but I don't want to be rude, but I have to be asked him again, okay, is it right, B-A-B-Y, it's your name? And he said, yes, correct. I said, every morning when I met him, I say, bonjour, baby, good morning, baby. Seriously, yeah. One day my wife Jane asked me, why you called him your baby? Really? But that's his real name. Yeah, seriously. But the happening changed our situation, changed completely, really. Because say good morning, baby. I cannot make any argument in my neighborhood because you say good morning, baby. Please, after worship service, ask everybody to whom you don't know their name, say, what's your name? In politely, please. And then please remember the name. It changed everything.